I guess the best place to start is with how things looked before all this mess. Before the trust shattered and everything I thought I knew about us came crashing down. My name's Jake. Jake Matthews. And I was 25 when all this happened. I'd been with Mia for almost 4 years. We met in college back in 2016 during our second year at the University of Manchester. She was this bright, vibrant sociology student who had this laugh that would fill a room. I was studying computer science, quiet, a bit awkward around new people. But somehow we clicked. People always said opposites attract, and maybe that's true. She was wild, I was grounded. She was loud, I was calm. But somehow we balanced each other out. For the first couple of years, things felt easy, normal, like a fairy tale without the cliches. We'd spend weekends at the city's parks, watch films in her tiny flat, overlooking the canals, cook terrible meals together, and talk late into the night about everything and nothing. We were young, stupid in the best ways, and pretty sure we'd last forever. But as the years rolled on, cracks started to show, subtle at first, nothing earth-shattering, just little things I didn't quite understand. Mia started having these girls' nights, every couple of weekends. At first I thought nothing of it. Everyone needs time with friends, right? But these nights weren't just occasional. They became routine. Every other weekend she'd disappear into the night with her girlfriends, sometimes texting me a few pictures here and there. But more often than not, I'd get nothing until the next morning, when she'd say she crashed at her friend's place. I remember the first time it really bothered me. It was late October 2017. We'd been dating for over a year, and I was sitting in our flat on a chilly Friday evening, scrolling through my phone, waiting for a message. Hours passed, and nothing. The silence was louder than I'd expected. I brought it up carefully, not wanting to seem paranoid, but honest. I told her how it made me feel, being left in the dark, not knowing where she was, or who she was with. I said it made me anxious, wondering if she was safe, or if something was going on. She looked at me with these eyes full of irritation mixed with exhaustion, and she told me, "Jake, you have to trust me. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just want some space with my friends." I nodded, though my gut twisted. I wanted to believe her, but I never really. Eventually, she cut herself off from that particular friend group. She told me the girls' nights were unfair to me, and she wanted to focus on us. Those weekends turned into quieter nights, board games, movie marathons, experiments with cooking new recipes, or sometimes just lying on the couch holding hands. I convinced myself that things were better, that the darkness had passed. Still, every now and then something would gnaw at me, a lingering doubt, like a tiny crack running through a glass window. I told myself I was overthinking, but sometimes when she went out with her new friends, or had to stay late at work, I caught myself scrolling through her social media, searching for clues that weren't there. I hated that about myself. I hated the distrust creeping in, but it was like a quiet voice I couldn't silence. Work was going well. I was building a career as a junior software developer at a startup in Manchester's tech district, a job that paid well for someone my age, and kept me busy enough to not obsess too much over the personal stuff. But at night, when the flat was quiet and Mia was out or asleep, my mind spun. I'd try to drown the worries with music or gaming, but it always circled back. Mia and I had shared dreams too. We talked about moving in together permanently, maybe buying a place outside the city, traveling a bit, even thinking about marriage somewhere far down the line. The future felt real enough to hold on to, even when the present was shaky. But beneath the surface, I felt her pull away. It wasn't drastic, not yet, but little things, the way she sometimes avoided my gaze, the way her smiles felt forced, the way she'd get quiet when I asked about her days out. She kept saying she loved me, that we were fine, that I needed to trust her. I wanted to believe it, but the knots in my stomach tightened. Then came the night that flipped everything upside down. It was late June. We hadn't had drinks together in months. Work had been hectic. The pandemic had just started to ease, and we were both craving some normalcy. I remember it was a Friday night, the air thick with summer warmth, and we decided to open a bottle of wine and relax. I kept encouraging her to do shots with me, telling her I loved seeing her get a little tipsy, her cheeks flush, and that mischievous sparkle in her eyes. But that night, she just looked sad. The longer we drank, the heavier the air got. I could see her hands trembling slightly, her eyes glossy but not with joy. After a while she broke down, tears spilling over, words barely coming out at first. It took a long time to calm her down enough to say anything. Eventually, she told me she needed to talk to her sister first, something serious, something she'd been carrying for years. I was confused, heart pounding in my chest. Family drama, something about her sister. But when she came back, she didn't talk about her sister at all. She told me that during one of those last girls' nights years ago, she cheated on me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The air left my lungs. I didn't know what to say. I felt betrayed, humiliated, angry, and she begged me not to ask for details, because it would only make things worse. But my mind raced. How could she drop that bombshell, half confess and expect me to just forgive her? I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw everything away. I told her it was stupid to confess without explaining, that I deserved the truth. She shook her head, tears flowing, but refused to say more. I told her I needed to know everything now. If she didn't tell me, I would leave and never come back. She panicked, begging me to stay, but I started moving toward the door. Just as I reached it, she confessed. She had slept with 2 men that night. 2. That broke me. She tried to hold me, to stop me from leaving, but I kept her at arm's length, numb and hollow inside. She went to bed early that night, broken and silent. I stayed awake, wrestling with the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to drown me. Morning came like a slow, reluctant tide, bringing with it no relief, only a deeper weight pressing down on my chest. The sunlight seeped weakly through the curtains, casting pale shadows on the walls of our flat. Mia looked drained, her eyes rimmed red, her skin pale, like all the color and warmth had been sucked out overnight. She moved silently, as if afraid to wake me, but the tension between us was impossible to ignore. I forced myself to get up and face the day. I needed answers. I told her to explain everything, in detail. No more half-truths, no hiding, no skipping parts. I needed to know what had really happened that night, so I could even begin to make sense of it. I warned her bluntly that if I found out later she'd left something out or twisted the story, I would never forgive her. She nodded, swallowed hard, and began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. She said that the 2 men had just been random guys hanging around the group that night, buying drinks for everyone. She said she felt invisible, insecure because they weren't paying attention to her at first. When they finally started talking to her, she said it felt like validation, a flicker of feeling wanted after months of uncertainty and doubt. She left with them to party further, after the main group had scattered, and that's when things crossed the line. I remember the room spinning as she described it. She said it happened with both men, that they were together at the time, and yes, it was simultaneous. The idea made my skin crawl in a way I never thought possible. I asked if she had any contact with them afterward. She said no, she didn't even know their names. She was careful, she said. Protection was used, and she had gotten tested for STDs. That part made me feel a little less sick, but it didn't change the core of the betrayal. I pushed harder. Was she on drugs? Was she forced? Did they threaten her? She shook her head at each question. No, no, no. She said she simply didn't care that night, like something inside her had snapped. And once it was over, the guilt hit her like a freight train. She told me that this was the only time, except for a kiss she barely remembered with another guy, but that it was the sex with those 2 men that haunted her. I was struggling to process it. I asked how she could have kissed someone else, and not stopped going out afterward. Why hadn't she told me sooner? Why had she kept it bottled up for 3 years? Her answers were shaky, apologetic, but mostly she just kept repeating how much she hated herself, how sorry she was, how she loved me more than anything now and didn't want to lose me. I told her I wanted to break up, that this was a line I couldn't cross. She freaked out, begging me to reconsider, to work it out, promising she was a different person now. I felt like I was watching a stranger stand before me, this guilt-ridden version of the woman I thought I knew. Then she said something that made my blood freeze. She asked if she could forgive herself. She said yes, almost immediately, like it was done, over, moved. I told her then, if the roles were reversed, if I had been out every other weekend, and she came home apologizing for cheating on me, she'd forgive me. She said yes, that if I was honest and wouldn't do it again, she would. I told her she was full of shit. She insisted she was, so I called her bluff. I told her every other weekend from now on, I'd be out with friends, and she wouldn't hear from me until the weekend was over. She'd have to trust me blindly, like she expected me to trust her. Her face fell. I saw the ghost of hope vanish. She locked herself away in our bedroom, and for a while I felt like a monster. That first weekend, I went to my friend Sam's house. He was the only one who knew what was going on. We binge-watched shows, drank a little, but I ignored every single message Mia sent. When I came back, she hugged me tightly, kissing me with a desperation I barely returned. She tried to see the night through my eyes, looking for some sign of what I'd done, but I gave nothing. This became our routine. Every other weekend, I'd go out and ignore her, and every weekday she'd walk around like a shell, her eyes hollow, trying to pretend everything was okay. I thought about breaking the act several times. There were moments when I saw glimpses of the woman I loved, the one I'd fallen for, but then the image was ripped away by the memory of that night. My friend Sam told me what I was doing was evil. He said if I couldn't forgive her, I should just end it. He was right, but I felt trapped, caught between the vengeful need to punish her and the fading love that still lingered. Now I'm left here, wondering if I'm the bad guy. I've gotten my revenge, but the wound inside me hasn't healed. If I'm honest, I don't think I ever can. After weeks of this Cold War, we'd slipped into me playing my part like some vengeful ghost, her stumbling through the ruins of what used to be us. I started to realize how much it was crushing both of us. But mostly, I kept telling myself it was necessary, that I needed her to feel some of the pain I was drowning in, that if she truly wanted to keep me, she'd have to prove. But late at night, when the flat was dark and quiet except for the ticking clock, I would lie awake wondering if I was just digging a deeper grave for what we once had. Mia was becoming unrecognizable. She walked around the flat like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, mumbling apologies like a mantra. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, that slow erosion of spirit. Friends noticed too when we met up. They'd ask if everything was okay, but I always brushed it off. What was there to say? Our relationship was fractured, broken, and I wasn't ready to let go, nor could I stay and pretend nothing had happened. The silence between us grew louder every day. I stopped sharing details about my life, my work, my thoughts. I stopped asking about her. The warmth and laughter that used to fill the rooms vanished. Instead, there was tension, a thick fog of regret and resentment. I remember one evening, sitting alone on the couch, scrolling through old photos on my phone, pictures from when we were happy. There was one of us at the Manchester Christmas market, mugs of hot chocolate in hand, grinning like idiots, despite the freezing cold. I couldn't help but ask myself how we ended up here, with me punishing the woman I once loved so deeply. My mental health took a nosedive. Nights became endless loops of restless thoughts and crushing guilt. I stopped sleeping properly, drank too much on weekends, and found myself snapping at friends and colleagues. The paranoia about whether she was hiding anything else, or if I was just torturing myself, was constant. I was stuck in a cycle of self-loathing and bitterness. Family got involved too. My sister called me one night, concerned after I ignored her texts for days. She gently asked how things were going with Mia. I told her something vague about needing space, about problems I couldn't explain. I lied because I wasn't ready to expose the wound. I felt ashamed, like I was failing at something so fundamental: trust, loyalty, love. Mia tried reaching out, sending long messages begging for forgiveness, promising she would do anything to make it right. But every word felt like a reminder of the fracture I couldn't fix. I'd read her messages, heart pounding, but then delete them without replying. It felt like stabbing myself every time I opened one. At work I was a ghost too. My boss noticed my slipping performance and pulled me aside. I fumbled through excuses, stress, personal issues, nothing concrete. I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. The shame was too heavy. I felt like a fraud, like I was falling apart, but pretending to hold it together. Then came a moment that shook me even more. One evening, Mia left a note on the kitchen table. It was simple, just a few lines saying she loved me, that she was sorry for everything, and that she wanted to fight for us if I'd let her. I stared at that note for hours, the words blurring as tears welled in my eyes. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to reach out and pull her back from the edge. But the other part, the part that was still raw and angry, held me back. I realized then that the problem wasn't just what she did 3 years ago. It was what it did to us now. The trust was gone, replaced by suspicion and pain. I couldn't move past it. Not yet, maybe not ever. I kept asking myself, was I punishing her because I loved her? Or because I hated what she did? Was I trying to heal or to hurt? And in that fog, the lines between love and hate blurred, until I didn't know where one ended and the other began. After months of living in that icy limbo, where everything felt like walking on glass shards, I reached a point where the anger and sadness weren't enough to keep me going. The bitterness had eaten away so much of me that I was left hollow, a shell of the guy Mia had once fallen for. I knew I couldn't stay stuck in that dark place. Either I needed to heal, or I needed to end it. But even then, the idea of letting go terrified me. Not because I thought I couldn't live without her, but because I feared what it said about me if I gave up. So I started to act, not in the way most people might imagine. No grand declarations or dramatic confrontations. It was quieter, a slow shift in how I saw everything. Starting with myself, I stopped pretending to be the cold, vengeful boyfriend. The act had run its course, and I realized it wasn't making either of us happy, if it ever had. One night, after coming home from another long weekend out, I saw her sitting alone on the couch, eyes hollow, staring at nothing. For the first time in months, I sat next to her and just held her. No words, no accusations, just silence and the steady beat of two broken hearts trying to find a rhythm again. I didn't know if it was forgiveness, or pity, or maybe the last thread of love clinging on. But it felt like a start. I also started going to therapy. At first I thought it was just to manage the anger and the betrayal, to find ways to cope with the pain she caused. But what I found surprised me. It was more about understanding myself. Why had I stayed so long after the betrayal? Why did I punish her instead of walking away? What was it about trust, love, and forgiveness that I was so afraid to confront? The sessions weren't easy. They dredged up memories and feelings I'd shoved deep down. The quiet doubts during those girls' nights, the creeping insecurity, the moment she dropped the confession like a bomb, and the nights I lay awake wondering what it said about me if I couldn't forgive. I realized that revenge, as satisfying as it felt in the moment, was just a way to avoid facing my own pain. It was easier to make her suffer than to admit that she hurt me deeply, irreparably. But healing wasn't simple. I wrestled with myself daily. Part of me wanted to forgive Mia, to try and rebuild something from the ruins. Another part wanted to shut her out forever, convinced that love without trust was meaningless. There were moments when I questioned everything. My morals, my capacity to love, even my identity. Was I a good person for wanting to punish her? Or was I just as broken as she was? I even toyed with the idea of revenge, beyond emotional coldness, imagining what it would be like to hurt her as she hurt me. But I never acted on those thoughts. Something inside me held me back. The last shred of decency, or maybe just fear of losing myself completely. The more I reflected, the more I understood that what I really craved was closure. An end to the endless cycle of hurt and silence. I finally sat down with Mia, not to argue or blame, but to lay everything bare. I told her that I didn't know if I could ever truly forgive her. I told her how deeply she had hurt me, how her actions had broken the foundation of everything we built. But I also told her that holding on to hate wasn't sustainable for either of us. We talked for hours, not about the past, but about the possibility of a future. We acknowledged the damage, the pain, and the mistakes. We didn't promise happily ever after, but we promised honesty. No more secrets, no more silence. That night, it wasn't about fixing or forgetting. It was about beginning to understand what it meant to be human, flawed, broken, and still trying. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog where every step forward was uncertain, but still somehow necessary. Mia and I didn't suddenly become the perfect couple, and the wounds didn't magically heal overnight. But something had shifted. The rawness between us softened just enough to let the possibility of something new, maybe not what we'd hoped for, but something real, start to take shape. I won't lie, I still carried a storm inside me. The betrayal was a scar that would never fully fade. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at her thinking about that night. The two men, the trust she shattered. My mind would spiral into what ifs and whys that had no answers. But I also started to see Mia again. Not the person she was then, but the person she was trying to be. Fragile, regretful, but trying. We rebuilt our routine slowly, carefully. There were no big romantic gestures or promises, just quiet evenings where we sat together, sometimes saying little, sometimes opening up about fears and hopes we hadn't voiced in years. I let her in a little more, and she let me see the guilt she carried, the nights she'd spent wondering if I'd leave forever. Sometimes forgiveness felt like a distant dream, impossible and too painful to reach. Other times it seemed just within grasp, like the first light of dawn after a long, dark night. I didn't know if I was a good person for staying, or if I was fooling myself with hope, but I knew that clinging to hate would only destroy me. And so I made peace with the uncertain, with the fact that some wounds don't close. They just become part of the story. A story about love, loss, pain, and what it means to keep going anyway. Looking back now, years later, I don't think I ever fully forgave Mia. And maybe I never will. But I forgave myself for being human, for making mistakes, for wanting to hold on even when it hurt. I think that's what makes us who we are. Not the perfect moments or the flawless love stories, but the messy, complicated journeys we take with each other and within ourselves. I don't know what the future holds for Mia and me, or if our paths will finally part. But I do know this. Life is too short to carry the weight of unforgiveness forever. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to accept the past, to face the pain, and to find a way to keep living without letting it break you completely. That's where I am now. Still healing, still broken in places, but still trying. And maybe that's enough.